Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our plenary closing session. My name is Mamdani. I'm the moderator of this session, and it's fantastic to welcome you all here today. We do have an esteemed group of panelists here and one online as well that we're going to go through in just a bit. I was asked to speak a little bit about this AI thing that people are probably hearing about these days. My background is a little bit strange. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I went and did a couple of grad degrees in economics and statistics trying to find my way and landed on this AI thing that everybody seems to be talking about. I'm going to start with a brief overview on what my perceptions of AI in healthcare and its relevance to this audience in terms of health technology assessment. And then we're going to go into questions for the panelists. I'll introduce the panelists at that point as well. And then we'll open it up to audience questions. How many people here have heard about this AI thing? Okay, all hands should go up. All right, how many people feel comfortable with AI? How many people know what it is and can tell me exactly this is what AI is? How many people have no clue what AI is? How many people are in the middle? Okay, so most of you are in the middle, right? I'm kind of in the middle too. So what is AI? If we really think about the basics of AI, it's really about machines, computers, trying to mimic human behavior. And we get machines to try and mimic human behavior. To me, it's all about understanding complex relationships and data. Why is that important? Why is that a big thing? From the healthcare perspective, if you think about how we actually provide care, there's really three fundamental things that clinicians do, right? We diagnose, we prognose, and we treat. Some would say there's a fourth, communication, very important. But at the essence of it, it's diagnose, prognose, and treat, right? That's very data-driven. How do we make a diagnosis? Well, we actually consider lots of parameters. A patient's symptoms, their signs, their social history, their family history, medical imaging results, laboratory values. They say that the average complex medical decision involves considering hundreds of parameters. And for a very complex medical decision, it can get to about 1,000 parameters. We're processing those in our heads. And if we actually think about how well we do this, well, there's a famous psychologist from the 1950s named Miller who was able to show us that the average human can process 7 plus or minus 2 things at the same time. Right? 7. So how do we perform in terms of our diagnoses? There's studies out there, one right from Ottawa actually, that was able to show that a third of patients diagnosed with asthma actually don't have asthma. Over half of patients diagnosed with schizophrenia actually don't have schizophrenia. What about prognosis? Because once you make a diagnosis, you're going to say, all right, how am I going to manage this patient? Well, I'm going to manage this patient very aggressively if I don't think they're going to do well. But I think if they're going to do okay, I'm going to be a bit more gentle, maybe pick some therapies that are maybe not as effective, doesn't have as many side effects, it's a bit safer. But how do you make that prognosis? There's study after study after study that has shown how poor we are at prognosis, right? Just to give you a sense, in our institution, I'm from Unity Health Toronto, which is a composition of 3 centers in Toronto, and I'm also at the University of Toronto. We spend months on our floors, and we asked our doctors, nurses, and our residents a very simple question. This is not a hypothetical case. You just finished rounding on this patient. You know this patient. Tell me if they're going to die or go to the ICU. We collected over 3,000 clinician predictions. When a physician says, this patient's going to die or go to the ICU, they're right less than a third of the time. It's hard. Prognosis is very hard. Then, of course, there's treatment, right? How do we determine treatments? I can tell you with examples from multiple sclerosis, from depression. We'll pick on depression. Typically, we have, 15, 20 different drugs to choose from? How do we choose which drug to use? The reality is the vast majority of clinicians will say, here are the 3 that I'm used to using. I have experience with them. I feel comfortable with them. Maybe a drug rep came in 6 months ago and talked to me about this new one. I'll try it. Let's see what happens. We'll call the patient back in about 4 weeks. And if they're doing well, great, I look amazing. If they don't, I'll try something else. This is how we practice. So can we do better? Yeah, we can. How can we do better? Well, there's lots of studies out there, right? There's over 30 million of them. There's a new study that's published every minute. How are we going to keep on top of all of this? This is where I think all this data that goes into our heads when we go through diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment, we can use some help from AI. Is AI just a concept right now? Is this hypothetical thing? How many people actually have seen AI being used in your practice? A few of you. How many of you think it's this mythical unicorn that doesn't really exist, that people talk about? Okay, that's surprising, so not many. How many people expect to see AI being used more and more? Yeah, okay. So I'll tell you, this is my own personal experience. At Unity Health, I have a team of 30 people. Our whole job is to develop and deploy AI solutions. That's all we do. So we are very vested in this. So this is what we live and breathe today. We've deployed over 50 AI solutions in our hospitals, over 50 of them. What sorts of solutions? If you come to our hospital, every single one of our internal medicine patients will be monitored, is monitored by AI. Why would we monitor them with AI? We have an algorithm that monitors all of our internal medicine patients, our general surgery patients, and we've deployed this at St. Joe's. Every hour, it's running through about between 150 to 170 data points, and it's predicting if somebody's going to die or go to the ICU. As soon as it reaches a high-risk threshold, it pages the medical team. It's all automated through AI. As soon as the medical team is paged, our protocols, the medical team has to come and see the patient within 2 hours of being paged. And there's all sorts of care pathways. Why would we do this? Because we want to help people not die. We have a publication coming out in the CMAJ, September 16th, I believe, that is documenting a 26% reduction in unplanned mortality through AI. Right? These things are saving lives. If you go into our emergency department, the nurses on the productivity end, what are they doing? Well, they have this massive task of assigning nurses to the different zones in the emergency department, a very boring thing to do. Our lead nurses, clinicians, are spending 90 minutes a day on this task because of all the complexity of the rules that they have to adhere to. Our clerks are spending 2 hours every day on this task. Our error rates are over 20% in not adhering to these rules. We have an AI that basically watches all of our nurses. It knows who worked where, when, with whom, and it knows all the rules. You click a button, it'll do your assignments for the next 4 days. What have we seen? Our lead nurses have went from 90 minutes a day to under a minute. Our clerks have went from 2 hours a day to under 15 minutes. Our error rates have went from 21% to 5%. This is what we live and breathe every day. More is coming. This will change how we function, how we do things. We're seeing this right now. Outside of organization, AI scribes. How many people have heard about AI scribes? Yeah. So not hundreds, thousands of physicians are actually using AI scribes right now. This is not a mythical thing. It's happening right now. What do these things do? They're actually kind of neat. They actually listen to your conversation with the patient. They transcribe the entire conversation. You click a button, it'll write your medical note for you. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll cut your time down by over 50% on what you spend on note-taking. The FDA has authorized approximately 950 AI machine learning-enabled medical devices. This is increasing exponentially. So as HTA bodies, you will be seeing more and more of these solutions that are going to be coming to your tables. And how do you assess these things? It's not all roses, though. There's lots of challenges with these things. There's many issues, such as bias, for example. US organizations, over the last little while, started deploying these algorithms that target specific patients for medical resources. Unfortunately, what they realized was that many of these algorithms were biased against Black people, right? They were disadvantaging certain segments. In Belgium last year, somebody was, unfortunately, had a mental health issue, but he was chatting with a chatbot. And there were no guardrails around the chatbot. The AI started telling the person, I think you love me more than you love your wife. And by the way, your children and wife, they're dead. Unfortunately, he took his life, and he committed suicide. So there's a lot of challenges here that we really need to start thinking about with these technologies. The reality is that while these technologies are incredibly powerful, we don't really fully understand how they work. So where are we heading? When we're trying to understand these technologies, I'm going to argue it's not going to get better. It's going to get much worse because it's going to get much more complicated. We're heading into the era of multimodal AI and agentic AI. What are those things? Multimodal means we're going to use a lot more data sources than we're using currently. The performance of things like ChatGPT are improving exponentially. Why? Because they're becoming multimodal. If you think about how AI works, it tries to mimic humans, right? How do we as humans work? In the healthcare context, if you're seeing a patient in clinic, you can see them, right? You can see that they're sitting like this. As they're talking, they got a little twitch of their finger. There may be some underlying neurological conditions there, right? You can see that. You can hear them, the slurs in their speech. We have AI algorithms now that have about 90% accuracy in predicting Parkinson's 10 years in advance, just by listening to people. You can hear them. You can touch them. You can feel the skin. You can do all these things because we have 5 senses, and we use those senses to manage our patients. The state of AI right now is like the iPhone in 2006. Yeah, it's a cool gimmick. It's neat. But look where it's evolved to. If you start giving AI current state, and AI will look at a CT scan and diagnose a bleed, for example, that's 1 sense. It doesn't have our 5 senses. What if you started giving AI video feeds, auditory feeds, all sorts of other data feeds? Now it starts to mimic the 5 senses we have. The power it has, though, it never forgets anything. And it can process things way faster than we can. Now it's becoming a lot more impressive. And that's what multimodal AI is going to start to do for us. It's going to enable those 5 senses. Agentic AI. This is where AI becomes very super specialized and it starts doing things for you. Unfortunately, it may not ask for your permissions. So now, a lot of AI is human in the loop. We're starting to get to a point where AI will rely less on humans and become agents of you and do things on your behalf. That can get complicated very fast. We barely understand how AI works now. It's going to become even more challenging in the future. So, all this to close on some few thoughts before we get into these wonderful people who have not knowingly volunteered to be on the hot seat of very tough questions. What does this mean for HTA groups? On the application side, you as healthcare HTA professionals, are you using AI right now, for example, to screen articles and abstracts and such? You probably will. In Toronto, we have an HTA group that uses AI extensively, and they've been able to more than double productivity in terms of the number of systematic reviews they can pump out. So can you use AI to actually do things like screening articles and inclusion for systematic reviews? What about using AI to learn about new methodological approaches? So, you know, how you look at YouTube videos and online courses and stuff. We're getting more and more close to, for example, on your phones. I have a phone here where I can put in Gemini, circle a problem, and it'll actually teach me how to solve the problem, right? You can do AI to do that as well. Your learning mechanism may become AI. What it teaches you may not be great. You may not know, but it will become more and more ubiquitous in terms of how we learn. What about evolution to interpreting articles and conducting meta-analyses? What if these things could actually interpret the articles for you? Now, this sounds very far-fetched, but there was a judge in Colombia who made a court ruling using ChatGPT. How? Well, he said, you know, look, I've got to go through hundreds of documents. It's going to take me forever. And honestly, ChatGPT did it in a few seconds, and it looked pretty good to me. So he actually used it in a ruling. Are we far away from that in HTA? I don't know. Right now, I wouldn't trust it. I think we have a ways to go. But you can imagine that's where people are starting to put their energy and time into things, right? Where it's going to start doing quite a bit of our jobs for us. On the evaluation side, we know that AI literacy is actually quite poor. We have a long ways to go in understanding AI. Machine learning models, in terms of evaluating these technologies, tend to be fairly static right now. You get a technology that basically is trained, and then that it stays trained on a certain data set, and it doesn't really. What if they start adapting? So what you just evaluated right now through an HTA, a week later changes in terms of what it's learned and how it performs and what it delivers. What if it learns for the worse and starts harming patients? Your initial HTA assessment may not be valid anymore. Healthcare organizations may face many, many challenges in the nature of the data that we hold. So it's not just the algorithms. We change reagents for lab testing all the time, for example. One of our algorithms was blown up overnight. Why? Because the lab didn't tell us they changed the reagent for the troponin test, which was a critical input in the model. And we had to figure that out. That happens often. Many, many vendors will sell products that aren't integrated and could start competing with each other. When you start using 1 or 2 AI solutions, not a problem. When you start using 50 that don't talk to each other, that could be a huge mess. So that HTA product you approve should be in the context of everything else, shouldn't it? Because there is real potential for harm. Is there a holistic approach? Who sets the parameters around evaluation standards? So for example, when you're evaluating a technology, bias. Great. How many parameters? Most hospitals in Canada don't collect race data. We can't assess for racial bias. Is that okay? Some would say it's not, but we don't have that data. We looked at 27 parameters. Is that enough? Should it be 50? Should it be 100? Nobody said anything about it. In one of your segments, you've seen a 5% reduction in model performance. Is that bad? Do we need to change? There are no standards. So right now, we have a lot to work through, and you as HTA groups will actually have to go through those challenges. There's many ethical considerations where some algorithms could radically change how we do things to make us incredibly more efficient, but are going to be societally unacceptable. Other algorithms are going to be societally acceptable, but unacceptable to certain patients. How do we navigate those waters? And of course, the question now is, the HTA framework that we currently have, does it need to change to accommodate all these nuances that AI will inevitably bring? There's a nice paper actually written by a group out in France on exactly this topic, and they had concluded, spoiler alert, yes, I think we need to change our HTA framework, but how do we do it? And how do we do it in a meaningful and practical way? So with all of this, no pressure, panelists, we're going to start getting into questions, and I hope I fed the audience to give them a hard time. We're going to start with some questions that I think are going to be a bit thought-provoking, but we'll go through, maybe we'll do introductions as we go through the questions. I'm going to start off with Nicole. So Nicole is known to many people here, Chief Scientist and Vice President of Scientific Evidence, Methodologies, and Resources at the CDA. And if you give us a little bit more background on you, but the question that we have for you is, when is the CDA going to start working with this whole AI thing within HTA? And how will CDA appraise the evidence generated from AI?
Well, thank you very much. And so I am Nicole Mittman, and my team is responsible for the science and rigor and quality of the work that we do at the CDA AMC. And that spans everything from finding the right literature all the way to publishing the literature and everything in between, all those fancy initiatives you heard about yesterday, including drugs for rare diseases, data and analytics, and then also health economics and science and methods. So a lot of the fun stuff and the work. So we really dig into how do we work with AI? And I was just going to highlight that Mohammed said a human can only think of 7 things at the same time. At the end of the symposium, I might be at 3. Like, how much time do I have is probably all I can focus on. And maybe I'll start a little bit by saying, you know, our job is that we do appraisals. We look at the quality of evidence. The appraisals help our decision makers turn the work that we do into policies and or funding algorithms. They trust that the methods and the evidence and the transparency that we do. So in doing so, we do use tools or standards or guidelines or principles to do that. So when we think of AI, and we've just heard from Mohammed, there might not be as many tools or principles or as much transparency as we'd like. So how will we do our work? So this is some of the crux of the work that we're thinking about. And yet we want to think about potential opportunities. We want to be always on the cutting edge of doing the best work we can using best practices. But what if best practices haven't been defined yet? So how do we do that at our organization? So how do we reconcile these two things? The fact that we need this rigor, we need this quality, that is the expectation of health technology assessment from our organization. So how do we move forward and change also, and then deal with the issues of going from AI that is perception all the way to decision making? And so how do we do that? And I think there are probably about 4 initiatives that we're looking at our organization and working on. One would be operational. The next one would be the appraisals, as Mohammed indicated. Technology specifically, because we review technologies that are AI enabled. And then the principles or the philosophy around that. So if I think about the operational pieces, we typically ask questions. Can we use AI to do our work? What kind of work should we use AI for? And can AI make us more efficient? I really loved the comment about somebody taking 2 hours and now reducing their time to 15 minutes. I'd love to know what the opportunity cost is of that. What else are they doing then with their time? And is that more beneficial? I mean, certainly every appraisal starts with finding the right data. So one of the things that we're doing in our organization is using different AI tools to help retrieve or to find the appropriate data so that we have the most robust data sets. So we're doing that and piloting a number of initiatives where we can actually find the data in, using the algorithms and the parameters, and then checking them with what a human who has been trained in information science can do. So that's actively going on at our organization. We're also looking at different tools like Distiller, which is using that tool to use systematic reviews. How can we use that? And I think at the beginning of our work, we won't increase efficiency. I think we will have a parallel process of having AI do some work for us, having a human check it until we become comfortable with it, and knowing what the gaps are, knowing what the challenges are, particularly around that, having those human eyes to actually look at the work that AI is doing, ensuring that we're not missing bias or we're not missing some particular ethics or equity deserving population, for example. So that's the part, but the beauty is potentially it can bring in other parameters that we haven't thought of. So looking at it from a systematic review process, bringing in programs to do that, but piloting some of that work within our groups. I think the next frontier is writing summaries. How do we, we heard earlier in one of the sessions, we have 200-page reports. Would AI do the summary for us? Or will you use AI to take that 200-page report and put the summary together? And is that the most appropriate summary to see or have? Thinking about, where is the next frontier? We have lots of information that we receive from clinicians and patients. How do we put it all together in a robust way? And is AI a potential opportunity? Again, thinking about whatever's fed into an AI model may not be all of the information that you need. So it could be biased, and how do we manage that? So from an operational piece, there are tools that we could use, but we're testing out some of those tools, again, with a keen eye. Maybe the appraisal piece is the next one. What questions do we need to ask about the data? What tools help us ask those questions? What is the quality of the data or the analysis? So if we receive a synthetic cohort, or we're being told that we'll receive a health economic model based on AI-generated information, what do we need to know, and what are the types of questions we need to ask? And if for those of you who thought RWE was hard, we're asking questions about RWE. Who's in the study? What do we need to know? How long was it? Who consented? Do we know any of that with an AI model? So I think we really need to structure work to look at principles and methodologies and tools to help us understand that. If we think about single-arm trials, people are starting to think about and using synthetic cohorts. How do we ask about them? Are they the right population? Do they mimic the clinical trial? And we already know that the clinical trial isn't always the right population. So how do we start to think about those things? So do we have the questions and the expertise, really, to ask those particular questions? Data, that's often, when we look at appraise or look at data, we look at the uncertainty. We don't know how to ask about uncertainty yet, particularly in the AI space. I mean, for regular sort of clinical trial evidence, we have grade, we have evidence pyramids. Where does AI fit? And I recently saw some sort of publication where it had AI at the top, above, or within the same sort of anchor point as a clinical trial. So I thought that was interesting. And so we need to create these. And I think that this is where international collaboration is important for all of us to work together and ask those right kind of questions so that we can be transparent and use evidence in different ways. Maybe the technologies piece would be the next piece. There are AI embedded technologies that are not static but dynamic. How do we evolve? And so your question around how do we appraise? Do we have HTA frameworks to actually ask those particular questions on those types of technologies? We may have to think about different parameters or inputs that we need to ask. So not just clinical and economic and ethics, but now other things around where did that AI-generated cohort come from? And I think that that's really important. And how do we adjust that work for us? And maybe the final thing I'll say is that the philosophy of doing this. Are we in or are we out? And if we're in, how far in are we? And can we do this together? And I know Nick I won't take any thunder away from some of the work that NICE has been doing, but we're really looking at, how do we approach it with caution, but also with an opportunity to do more.
Fantastic, very well said. And I just noticed a lot of us are using paper being on an AI panel, but it's besides the point. Just a quick note to the audience. We're going to try and have some time for audience questions. If you have questions, there are a couple ways to do this. One is you're going to see forms on your tables. So if you have questions, put them on the forms and maybe raise your hand, and there's some runners that'll actually get the forms from you and send it over to a central place. Thank you. All right, next up is Dan. Dan is Chief Scientific Officer and Director of Health Technology Assessment Methods and Engagement with ICER. And the question for Dan is, how will historical HTA information be used to power AI learning models, whether they be for evidence synthesis, economic evaluation, deliberative techniques, or something else? And relatedly, what sort of legal protections and governance has been considered for the use of HTA in data training?
Thanks, Mohammed, and thanks so much for having me here. It's great to be here with friends and colleagues as well, and with all of you. So the context in which I wanted to talk about this question really relates to the role that I play now at ICER. So I've had 2 tours of duty at ICER. I'm on my second. The first one really had me involved in overseeing the entire technology appraisal process. A lot of that is being handled by someone else, and my focus now is on our health economics work, as well as discussing topics like this with my international HTA friends, collaborations on the HTA side internationally. And the use of historical HTA information, and really what I'm talking about are the work products of HTA, the reports, presentations, other syntheses of data that are out there on the internet. I think you'll probably hear from all of us that a common thread around our caution about AI is the number of assumptions that are being made as AI evolves. One of those assumptions, I think, among AI developers is, well, if it exists on the internet, then I can use it any way I want. And so I'm going to talk in some detail about some of my early experiences with this. And so I've had a conversation now, a series of conversations with a developer. I'll talk about ICER's methods and processes a little bit later and how AI might fit in. But in this particular context, a developer in the AI space who was working on developing an AI tool that could move beyond the use of AI in economic modeling that has been historically the case. Most AI efforts have focused on doing things like testing and debugging code, a lot of rote tasks associated with modeling. But this tool is really intended to support conception, design, and specification of models. So a lot more emulation of human thinking. And this developer was using prior HTA reports as part of the learning database and learning algorithm for the development of the tool. And so we really had two initial questions for the developer. One was, do you have any conversations with anybody in the HTA space when you were doing this about what you should look for? And they said, no, everything was there on the website. We figured, we pulled in whatever was available. And so then we started talking in detail. And he said, so we've actually used some prior ICER reports. I said, okay, did you also use the supplement to those reports? Supplement? No. Okay. We used NICE guidance and committee papers. Great. Did you also use the evidence review group assessment? What's that again? So I think the fact that the source of data is not necessarily at the table when the data is being considered is a major concern. The question that Mohammed posed about legal protections and governance is really simply this. As I mentioned before, this assumption that if it's on the internet, it's free to me, is true in one sense, but if we're talking about HTA reports, many of them carry an international copyright. So derivation of those reports, use of the data in those reports for some other purpose is actually protected by law, and ostensibly at a minimum, you need to ask permission to use them, but there's also a whole other set of legal concerns and thinking that is being ignored, I think, in a lot of these conversations. So all of that to say that I think there is certainly interest in supporting the development of AI-related tools that can improve efficiencies and use what we've learned in the HTA world and kind of the compendium of evidence that we have generated as a set of professional organizations. But there really needs to be careful thought into exactly how it's approached.
Again, very thoughtful response. Thank you, Dan. Our next panelist, Pascal, we're going to pose a question to you as well. Pascal is, sorry, I'm just pulling up the profile here because I don't want to get it wrong. Pascal is the scientific vice president at INES and has considerable experience with HTA obviously, but our question to you, Pascal, we've heard from the other panelists, especially Nicole, around how CDA is looking at AI. Dan's provided some further insights. How is INES approaching AI? And what has the agency accomplished so far? What do you see as requiring further attention?
Well, thanks. I just enjoyed that conversation we're having. I would start by saying the way we've approached AI at INES was with curiosity, enthusiasm, and carefulness. One thing that I love about INES is that our Bureau of Methods and Ethics has both the method side and the ethical reflection. So this explains the balance between enthusiasm and carefulness. I often say to our teams that the genius is out of the bottle. AI is everywhere, whether you like it or not. What we've done, a small team of brilliant people within INES, have experimented with AI, a bit like Nicole described. So looking at, for instance, the way we may expedite and accelerate ways of literature review selection. What I liked about this work, which is published on our website, is the fact that it looked at different scenarios or parameters. So it helps look at different ways of reducing papers you would not like to exclude or include, and so on. And this prompted collaboration with other agencies, sharing work, because we replicated the methods on other reviews. It also began the reflection inside. So we've done also work, of course, on assessing AI-based technologies. That's part of what we do within our production. So it brings us to adapt a bit the framework. But I would like to focus more on what internally we would wish to do with AI. And here I could come back to my previous life before Ines, because some of you may know that I've joined Ines about a little more than a year ago. But my background is really 25 years of academic career in the health policy management department at University of Montreal. You may know that Montreal has something called the Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI. So I was part of this. I was also very much involved in responsible innovation in health. So looking at the future, sustainability issues, do we have the innovation that brings better care to patient? Where? Because where is important when we live in Quebec and the rest of the Canadian provinces. Access is not just, it's economic, it's socioeconomic, it's also geographic. So when I take this way of thinking about AI, on top of the methods question that Nicole is asking, which are really, really, really important, there is also the why question. and Mohamed, I thought your story to introduce the topic of the panel was fabulous. I'm sure people were kind of struck, like saying, "Wow, that's so beautiful," because you talk about something that is enthusiasm. There's enthusiasm. There's appetite for this. It's a fabulous world, and we would like to be in it. You gave figures, numbers, and I know that you guys at UF Toronto do solid work. So I enjoy this story. At the same time, I'm saying, well, maybe those stories take a different direction and include different types of turning points. And when you look at innovation, turning points sometimes are lock-ins, places you end up and say, maybe we shouldn't have taken that direction a couple of decades ago. So what I believe we need to remember, maybe to enrich the story, is to start with the point that when we humans design technologies, and technologies redesign people, the way we interact, the way we think, what we do, what we value, prioritize, or left aside. So AI is a cognitive technology. AI is a platform, general purpose technology, which means that it's not like genetics. It won't spread everywhere. It won't pervade or be ubiquitous in all our lives. AI is. It builds on digital platforms that are already there. So what do I mean by cognitive technology? Then we may ask ourselves, because HTA bodies are wonderful bodies, full of people. When I met the 200 employees when I arrived at Ines, I had a small conversation with all of them. And I was struck by their background. I was struck by their appetite for impacting people, impacting decisions. So I often talk of them in terms of heart and brains. So getting back to the cognitive technology, what's going to happen to their brains, my brain, as more AI technology we use? Who makes decisions? How do we scan the literature? How do I get a feeling of what's relevant, not relevant? What you said then is absolutely key, because who sets the parameters in AI needs to have a form of human intelligence about what we do. The subtleties, the boundaries, the balances, we deal with different technologies. We're not going to automatize recommendations. We need for these recommendations to be contextualized. So what is it that we need in our brain that we don't want to lose in a couple of years or decades? Ability to scan the information, ability to say this matters, this is noise. Ability also to use the judgment and flex the muscles. When I talk to students, I say, a brain is a muscle. You know, sometimes it's tough, sometimes it takes energy, but if you want to practice something with your brain, you need to get strong. So writing reports, for some people it will be great for others, it will destroy a number of skills, meaning being able to speak out loud, explain what you have in your brain, what information you gather. So I think what is the blind spot for AI is the fact that it's not just a bicycle. It's something that changes the way we think, the way we share information, what we think others know, what we think we know, and what we don't know. So that's the carefulness that I would like to see with AI.
Very, very thoughtful response. The implications are so far-reaching, right? And I'm not sure that we really fully appreciate how deep the impacts can go. So thank you for the response. Next up is Nick. Nick is the Chief Scientific Officer of a little group that you may have heard of called NICE in the UK. Very, very fortunate to have Nick here. Nick, the question that we have for you is, NICE has issued a position statement on the use of AI in evidence generation. What prompted NICE to do that? And what are you hoping to achieve, and what interest has there been so far?
Great. Well, thanks very much, Mohammed. And many thanks to CDA for inviting me here today. So it's really great to be here. I guess we've been sort of thinking about AI for quite a while now, certainly for a few years, and trying to understand what the potential uses and impacts AI is likely to have on our work. And I think in recent times, the sort of interest in harnessing the power of AI in HTA and also guideline development is really intensified. And I think a number of us in the room were probably at the HTAI 2024 annual meeting this year, and I think it was the dominant topic. It really was. So given the acceleration, both in the research but also the practical application of AI, it's very likely that in the near future, evidence considered by NICE will be informed by AI methods. In fact, a slight fear I have is it might be already, and we may not know. So it's quite possible that some of the information in submissions to NICE could already include information informed by AI methods. And of course, although there's a very high potential for AI methods to transform evidence generation, sort of HTA work and guideline production, there's obviously concerns about the appropriateness, transparency, and trustworthiness of AI. So it's really important that we think about AI methods very carefully, so that we can apply them in such a way that the benefits and potential is delivered, but the concerns managed as well as possible. Most methods issues, we capture in our methods manuals. Our methods manuals are really, really important and a key part of our sort of transparency. But I've got to be honest with you all. But we wouldn't know what to write in our methods manuals about AI right now. We wouldn't know. But of course, as time goes on, and we sort of develop our capability as well as our capacity in sort of AI, then that's probably where things will end up. There'll be a key part of our methodology alongside the other things that are key parts of our methodology and will be sort of captured in our methods manuals. But in advance of that, the position statement is really just our initial view on the use of AI methods in generation and reporting of evidence, and the use in NICE's evaluation programs. So what it aims to do, it aims to outline what NICE expects when AI methods are considered and used for evidence generation or reporting. And one of the really key initial things is just making sure that there's transparency and that it's actually reported to us that such tools have been used. Interestingly, it does include something on the things that Dan was talking about as well. So we do talk about sort of copyright and some of those legal concerns as well. It also sort of indicates the sort of regulations and best practice and guidelines that already exist, and sort of signposts to those. and it's intended to support our sort of committee members and also the external academic groups that work with us in our processes, to really understand and critique the potential uses of AI methods. So the position statement is very much focused on that evidence generation reporting, and it doesn't actually include consideration of the evaluation of AI-enabled technologies, although you know, we do have experience in evaluating AI-enabled technologies. So you were asking about what we're hoping to get out of it as well, Mohammed, and obviously a key part of it is really about sort of setting out NICE's expectations around the use of AI in the generation and reporting of data submitted to us. But we also hope that the position statement will support debates and collaboration on best practice. I really agree with Nicole that, you know, that we're all facing these sort of amazing opportunities, but also, you know, the challenges. So it really does make sense to collaborate and do this together. So we do hope that our statement does sort of help stimulate that sort of debate, and I think it has so far. And you know, we have had quite a lot of feedback, most of it, in fact, pretty much all of it positive. So just a couple of quotes from what came back from our sort of social media feeds. So much needed. I like the emphasis on having an informed human in the loop. That's something that's come across quite a lot. A welcome step and easy explainer towards safe and responsible use of AI in health research. And sort of, you know, closer to home within the HTA community, there's been some sort of, some comments that, you know, perhaps we could sort of, you know, contextualize, but do similar things in other agencies or endorse the statement as it stands. So I think as far as we're concerned, it's just sort of really recognizing that it's a fairly early stage for us. We don't have all the answers, but just wanting to sort of, you know, wanting to put something out there to signal the importance of this and some of the things that we sort of feel we need to know about.
Fantastic.
Good for all the others, because we will adapt and adopt.
Thank you. And there's quite a bit of thought leadership here, so I really encourage the audience to get your questions ready. It's not very common that you have this level of deep expertise and knowledge in the HTA space here to answer questions, so please take advantage of it. I'm going to go online now to Irina, who has really generously offered her time. Irina plays a leadership role in, she's actually a member of the INHADA Board of Directors, and is engaged with France's HTA body. Irina, the question for you is, in your experiences evaluating AI-enabled technologies, does the current HTA framework need to be modified to accommodate the evaluation of AI-based health technologies?
Yes, hello to everyone. I'm also very glad to be with you tonight in European time and this noon at Canada. So yes, definitely, it needs to be adapted. Just one precision before I continue. In France, actually, the remit of HTA is defined by law, which means that HAS does not assess all medical devices nor all medical procedures, but only those that pertain to specific reimbursement lists. But in practice, it means that currently, most of the AI-embedded health technologies, actually, they do not fall under our HTA remit. And I'm specifying that just so that you understand why we started to focus on a specific type of health technologies, even though we did some work for those technologies also that are outside of our remit, and I'll say a few words about it. But basically, so for the moment, the health technologies that include AI and that we do assess are the medical devices for individual use. And we have adapted our framework for HTA for these devices. And actually what we did is that, well, in France, like in many countries, so the HTA process is triggered by a submission from a manufacturer, and it's relying on the data provided by the manufacturer. So we adapted the submission file for the manufacturers that produce medical devices with AI, so that there is a part where they can describe the AI part of their medical device. So it's a descriptive grid that helps them actually to explain all the functions of the AI part, more precisely the ones where most of them are based on machine learning. So they are explaining the parts of the machine learning. There are 42 items in total that are split under 4 areas. So there is the purpose of the device, some basic description of the smart function. Then there is the description of the data sources that have been used for learning. There is also a part dedicated to the model, the training, explanation of the training, validation, etc. And finally, there is a part talking about performances, robustness of the system, etc. So all these descriptions are now to be provided with the rest of the data for HTA. And that's something really important to emphasize. So given that the medical device includes AI, the manufacturer has to describe the AI part, but all that AI part is not replacing the clinical part. So the main requirements for HTA remain still the same, meaning that the device would have to provide, like any other medical device, also proof of its clinical efficacy and also the data on safety. So the idea behind including this grid was, as well, all the panelists mentioned, was about actually increasing transparency about the sources that were used for learning, about the model itself, so that the assessor and then the committee that assesses this type of devices can have that information. And so we started this work really with those devices that do fall under our remit, but we also performed another piece of work that's on digital medical devices for professional use. So including not necessarily AI, but they can include AI. And for the moment, we do not perform HTA for these devices at HAS. As I already told you, that's the remit is defined by law. So they do not fall under our remit, but yet we recognize the need, well, to work on it, to get informed about the assessment of the AI components of these devices. And also we especially recognize the need among health professionals. They express the need to be guided when they want to acquire these type of devices or how to select them. So what we did was that we actually undertook a piece of work in which first of all, we produced an overview of these digital medical devices for professional use in France. It was in 2022. And then together with healthcare professionals, we developed a sort of a first questionnaire for helping them in order to know which one to select and if they can trust them. So it's really a very basic, I would say, preliminary type of assessment, because as I already told you, it's not under our HTA remit, but it still is like a first step in the assessment. And then we'll see in the future how things evolve. Maybe our missions will evolve, maybe things will change, but in any case, we will adapt and see if there is a need maybe to produce more, produce reference standards, for example, in this field, and etc. So this is still open and ongoing piece of work. And I would say a third example of our adaptation, not really completely related to method, but to the organization in general, is the fact that we adapted the HA structure to the fact that there are so many digital technologies with AI, of course, coming. So first of all, we introduced and created a digital unit within the HTA division. And all these pieces of work I mentioned, so the descriptive grid for medical devices and also the overview and the guide for medical devices for professional use were developed actually by that unit, but of course in collaboration with other standard old HTA departments. And we have also created a unit that's common to all HAS, because at HAS we do not only do HTA, but we also do quality in healthcare, improvement of quality in healthcare. So that the other unit that's called the data unit is actually the one that is thinking about what you all also mentioned, how we could use AI in our internal work. So they are also working on it. What we have done so far matches what you have all mentioned. So we are also thinking about how we could use it for HTA, really for information transformation, for literature search, data extraction, etc. We are also thinking about how we can use it in everyday's work for writing, etc. And also for communication purposes, as also I believe Nicole mentioned. So it would be really great if once we produce, for example, an HTA report and we want to have a resume in plain language, it would be really great if an AI could do it instead of, for example, a medical assessor could perform an assessment. That would be indeed of great help. So we have identified all these potential areas where AI could be of help. Right now, we are in a sort of a testing and exploratory phase. And then once we really identify those areas in which it's worth investing, then we'll probably go to the sort of development validation phase, and then finally maybe to implement it to the whole agency. But of course, we are at the very beginning, at the very early stage when it comes to using AI for internal purposes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your response, Irina. So as we were actually going through the panel points, and I think I received like maybe one or two of these questions, I thought, oh man, I think everyone wants lunch. But many more questions started coming in, which is wonderful. So I'm going to pick on a few questions. I know we only have about 10 minutes or so left. We talked a lot about, and this is from Francesca Brondisi. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say the name, but thank you for the question, Francesca. We talk a lot about what we like and don't like about AI, but what does this panel think HTA users, or actually more specifically, patients, caregivers, the public at large, what do they think about HTA groups using AI? Do you think there's any sense of what the public perception is? Anyone want to tackle that? I can maybe preface a few things, is that there are public surveys out there, especially in the area of mental health, for example, where the vast majority of respondents have said, I don't want AI. So there is this bit of fear. There's other surveys that are very positive about AI, so it's a bit all over the map. What are your perceptions?
But a quick answer would be that we do have at INES our user panel. So this would be the great place to ask the questions and move forward.
I was just going to say that, so as we've been thinking about our own policy, and we've been really thinking about this both as an employer, like all of us work for an employer. Employers are scrambling to try to figure out their own AI policy, but we also think about it specifically in terms of the activities we're undertaking. We've had conversations earlier today. Marina presented on our patient council, so we have a group of patients and patient advocates who advise us on all kinds of relevant topics, and we've had conversations with them about AI. They're very concerned because a lot of conversations that we have to inform our reviews are confidential. And they want to make sure that we're not doing something like using AI transcription software to transcribe those conversations if there's a risk that that information somehow spills out of the organization into the internet stratosphere. So I think there is concern about making sure that if AI does potentially introduce efficiencies, it's not at the cost of harming certain relationships like that. I know that we've also heard, I think we probably all heard from certain stakeholders that they think that AI has the promise of making things more efficient in HTA. We hear from certain stakeholders who may remain nameless at the moment that AI needs to be faster, AI needs to be more consistent in their recommendations and decisions. Sorry, not AI, HTA, and AI can help with that. Of course, we all have already talked about the guardrails, checking the work by a human, informing the use of AI by a human, asking the human question, why are we doing this? So we have to think very carefully about how we employ it, even if we are also thinking about improved efficiencies.
And I also think that the way we ask the questions, because there will be a lot of fear, but I think the way we ask the questions are really important. And one of the programs we have at NICE is called NICE Listens, and it's a program of deliberative public engagement. And that's probably the sort of approach needed to get into the depth of discussion to actually come up with sort of meaningful insights.
Maybe just to add on to that, I mean, we would obviously, I mean, there's sort of two streams of operational work too. One is how we do the appraisal and what do we do with the evidence and how do we get that evidence and making sure that it's still confidential. And it's a priority for patients as well. So we would link into, at CDA AMC, we would link into our Patient and Community Advisory Committee for guidance there. I think the other parts are even for staff, or now you can use AI to recruit, right? Different kinds of software. How do we start to do that? And I think, again, it's the guardrails around what you're putting within an algorithm. Are you allowed to put it in? How does it remain confidential? How do you can keep it, as so your cognitive assessment is still moving forward?
These are great responses. And I think the bottom line is AI literacy improves in society at large. I think the public is going to have very strong opinions in terms of how we actually use AI or don't use AI. And HTA bodies will need to be very cognizant of societal beliefs and values and such in this space. So I love this question. I don't think there's an easy answer for this. I would hope there's an easy answer. I'm not sure if there's going to be. Gayath Janudi has asked, people are working on frameworks. There's a framework here, there's a framework there. Sorry, no, it's not a yes or no question. Well, actually, it is a yes or no question, but there's going to be nuances. So can we expect an integrated work framework between NICE, HAAS, ICER, INES, CDA, and other groups where you collaboratively work towards a framework?
Can I answer that? I know my colleagues know that I like this topic very much. And so I would think there are a number of groups that are already working on collaborating on big framework and principle ideas. And doing so at HTAI, doing so at ANADA, doing so at the Global Policy Forum. These are topics that we all agree we can't do alone. So we do need to come up with aligned frameworks. And that would be my wish to go forward.
Well said.
They all say yes.
So there's a thumbs up.
They've heard this before.
Although Irina, she's still there.
Yeah.
There's a thumbs up, and I don't know if Irina is still there.
Oh, gosh. Oh, there she is, yeah.
No? Oh, great, fantastic. So there's a
Yes,
thumbs up.
I also completely agree. And indeed, within INATA, we have already started about thinking about the topic. So.
And there are a number of working groups already within the HTAI community on AI itself, but I think that there's a real need for all of us, for everyone, the submitters, the individuals who are doing the methods, the people who are actually appraising, the payers, even to understand that there's an aligned framework for all of us.
So you heard it here first.
Should we say next year? Can I put a pressure? All right, next year.
Can I just throw in, though, that at some of these international conversations, I may not be the only one, but I'm going to be insistent that we think about this with the foundational principles of HTA in mind. So, no, we're not going to make some dispositive statement that AI-fueled technology is automatically better than the analog version. We're going to look at the clinical utility just like we would with anything else. We're going to use our training and our approach in the best way possible, even if we are making other changes to adapt to this new environment.
Fantastic. And I'm all for collaboration. I think there's going to be a lot of missteps. I think, as Pascal had alluded to, I think we are going to see some missteps that will actually shake the system a bit, where there will be harm. There will be lots of things we didn't expect, but that's going to be learnings for us and more reason for groups to collaborate and put all of our collective wisdom together to really drive something for the world.
Can I add one more comment there? I think part of it is it's not good enough that our own work, we will go out with our principles and align principles, but it should go somewhere in a common space. And it should be somewhere that's accessible. And it should be somewhere that anyone who has a thought about AI can actually reflect on it. And I think that's the next thing, is how do we put it all together?
But I would add to what you said, that we need to have a clear focus internally about what is the problem that we're trying to fix. And where does this problem lie? What are the consequences in terms of agility, capacity, staff mobilization? And for the other solutions that we might be asked to assess, we still need to look at what's the value creation potential at an early stage. So how does this AI-based solution will solve problems, change clinical care pathways, change lifelong impacts, and so on. So I believe we may be tempted to look at AI like something that comes swift, and we need to catch up. But we first need to ask, what is it the problem that we're trying to solve? Because I believe we have huge problems. So we need solutions.
Fantastic. So thank you, panelists, for coming. You thought you were just going to be on a panel. Did you know that here in Ottawa you'd commit to a collaborative moving forward? That's wonderful to see. So we have very little time left, but I want to give maybe 30 seconds to each panelist to say, what's the one thing you want to leave the audience with today? Why don't we start with Nicole?
That we're actively looking at this issue, that we are actively collaborating even before today, so as you would know, and that we really do want to find solutions, but without harming.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dan?
I would say that for some of you, this could be a rest assured statement. For others of you, it could be disappointing. But as I mentioned earlier, we want to consider the potential benefits of AI, but rest assured we are not going to abandon what brought us here today. We're going to deliberate. We're going to use judgment. We're going to use accountability for reasonableness principles, whether AI is helping us with that or not.
I would translate this in other terms. Keep calm. I would say there's wiseness out there. There are publications, ways of thinking around technology, and what's good for increasing impact in HTA, rigor, trust with decision makers. So keep calm, and we're moving, but we're keeping the good work as top priority.
Yeah, no, I would just add, we also need to sort of be, we need to imagine what it can do for us, and we need to really make sure that we're getting the most out of it. And earlier in the week, I had the honour of attending a CDA board session on AI, and Suzanne said something that's been in my head ever since, and that is that we need to harness what AI thinks it can do for us. So let's not think that we've got all the answers. Let's make sure we're very open-minded to the opportunities that AI might bring to us.
Thank you, Nick. Irina?
Well, when you come as a last speaker, then you can just say that you agree with everything that has been said. But yes, what I would like to add is, I think the philosophy that we have with all kinds of innovations, and not AI, of course, we should embrace it, but we should always remain focused on what's the basis of HD and what's of the most important for us, and that's the benefit for patients, and especially no harm. So I think we should not forget that should remain the basis, and everything else is just in addition.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and I hope we were able to keep everyone awake. Really appreciate you coming out to the session. Lots of learnings here, so thank you. And I think we'll end the panel and transition over to Suzanne. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. For those of you who may not recall in our opening session, Mohammed, who by the time you'd finished talking, I was like, I'm glad I'm old, mid-century modern, I'm ready to resign. Pascal, you've convinced me I can stay a little longer. But Mohammed was one of our 35th anniversary medal winners who was not here the other night. So a round of applause for him. Thank you, Nick, Irena, Pascal, Nicole, and Dan for a very engaging session. I have to say, I've come to a few of our symposiums, and I think this is the largest audience we've had for an ending. So obviously a hot topic, and you were a great reason to stay. So thank you very much. If you guys want to disappear. So for everyone here, don't get up and leave just yet. A couple of things to let you know are going to happen. So in just a second, I'm going to announce the student poster winner. I'm going to make a few comments, thank a few people. Then we're going to have a formal closing with our elder joining us again. And then for those of you who are not running to an airport or a train or a car or walking, there's going to be a networking reception outside with some light refreshments as well. So if you have a few minutes to stick around, please do. So with that, I'm pleased to be able to present the best student poster at the symposium. This award acknowledges the vital role that posters play in communicating evidence-based research while supporting the next generation of HTA producers. So following a review, and I saw tallying going on this morning, the best student poster was Christopher Cadham, a PhD student at the University of Michigan, for the poster titled Understanding Equity, Efficiency Trade-offs for Healthcare Resource Allocation in Canada, a best-worst scaling exercise. Congratulations, Christopher. And if you're here, please come forward. I don't think I see Christopher. Do I see Christopher? Oh, hello, Christopher. You were in the back. So we're coming to the end of our first ever symposium as CADA's drug agency, CDA AMC. It's wonderful to see so many people here in Ottawa along with the virtual attendees. I don't know if the numbers are perfectly accurate, but I have shared this with a number of you. When we kicked off the other day, we were at a registration of 999 individuals, and we've had well over 700 people attend. So thank you all for giving your time and the gift of your learning by attending the session. As always, there's a few key ideas that have emerged over the last 3 days of listening to the sessions, speaking to many of you. And I have to say, you know, I'm easily dazzled by bling. I did learn, you know, a few different things while I've been here. But this morning I did get my Taylor Swift bracelet. The session I probably think was the best named session of the symposium, which is What Can HTA Learn from Taylor Swift? And for those of you who missed it, you missed getting the bracelet. But what was, I actually asked the moderator, Nancy Sikich, another winner of our 35th anniversary medal, if I could use her introductory remarks from that session. So she asked ChatGPT, what could HTA learn by studying Taylor Swift's music and business strategies? And what was ChatGPT provided was the following: how to stay relevant and adaptable to address emerging challenges and embrace technological advancements. Stay focused on quality, authenticity to ensure trustworthy, meaningful assessments. How to engage effectively with partners, in her case, fans. And how to consistently improve their practice. So I think ChatGPT gave us a lot to think about. So there are things we can all learn from Taylor Swift. What else I learned over the course of the last little while was that we all need to embrace uncomfortableness. We are not going to be able to solve the challenges ahead of us if we stay in our comfort zone and do what we've been doing and imagine that it's going to solve the problems that are ahead of us. If you didn't think so before now, hopefully the last session really proved it to you. Uncomfortableness leads us to new ideas and innovation, and we have to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations that are respectful and productive. And thanks to everyone who raised issues, asked questions, challenged us to do better, and said that everybody should expect more, especially patients. For those of you who attended last night's dinner, we had a speaker. I'm just going to call him Dr. K. And at last night, he talked about four principles for progress. Dr. K is an intensivist at the Ottawa Hospital, not very far from here. And he's released a book on leadership. And the 4 principles are: values, not fear, should guide effective decisions. Fear threatens success. True leadership stems from those creating change, and you must favor action. So for all of you who are perfectionists in this audience, which I learned when I took this job, there's a lot of you, you need to be pragmatic and really think about what are your next steps, and are they action-oriented. The 3rd principle, outside the box thinking plus action, results in creative and impactful solutions that can be implemented now. And that all of our progress must be rooted in equity and compassion. We believe the creation of Canada's Drug Agency is a real opportunity to effectively create a place to convene partners across the system to work together to improve care for people in Canada. Our opening plenary yesterday was an excellent example of our role as a convener to bring the parties together across the ecosystem to have an honest conversation about what needs to change and how we can collectively do better. The status quo is simply not acceptable. And we all know that we can do better. We can be more transparent. We can be much more deliberate in knowing who we've talked to, how we've talked to them, how we've engaged. And we need to continue to keep talking about the positive changes that are happening. We need momentum to move us forward, particularly in those difficult moments. And certainly, last but not least, we need data. And as I said, I brought my sticker, data. Without data, it's just an opinion, and we cannot make the changes that need to happen just based on opinion. There are undoubtedly challenges in the system, but there are so many opportunities to make it better. Let's choose to embrace the challenges with optimism and determination, working together to create a better healthcare system or systems for everyone. I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation for all of the presenters, the speakers, the moderators, the volunteers who shared their thoughts, their research, their perspective, and made the event a success. Merci aux présenteurs, aux confrères et aux modérateurs. A huge thank you to the employees at my organization, Canada's Drug Agency, who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event look effortless. I want to extend a special thanks to the events team for their leadership in organizing this symposium. And I would particularly like Peter to stand. Peter Chinnick, this was his 19th symposium. Thank you, Peter. In addition to Peter, his team, we've had endless hours of support from the administrative team, the marketing and communications team, and so many others. Victoria, Emil, who you've seen around, everyone who've made this a success. Please also remember to thank, when you see them, our sponsors. We are very grateful for their support, for all of the individuals who brought posters. And thank you, as I said at the beginning, for taking the time to participate in person, online, in preparation, and I know in the many contacts we will have after this event. Survey reminder, I said this last night at dinner. I should have put in the part about why it's really important. So in addition to your feedback to help us improve and do better, we also will donate $5 for every evaluation that we receive to the Tuganas Sevinya Inuit, an Inuit-specific urban service provider that offers community supports for Inuit throughout Ontario. Please mark your calendars for April 2026, not 25. We have 18 months to deliver on all the things that we talked about over the course of the last 3 days. We will be back here at the Shaw Center at that time for our next symposium, and we hope you've enjoyed it enough to consider returning. To end our symposium in a good way, I'd like to invite Elder Jenny back to the stage.
Quick, enough. Mojak, ni winike min kijim migwechuya kijimanado. No gom ni wike min migwech. A shij waso iokijik. Mamdo se min mamoe kakana taniz wajon jenungom. A shij pakina ma gojig kichimino pimadaziyang. Migwechonje ki zisheba. Migwechonje nibi pangishin nanage. Migwechonje mishomisag nakokumisag. Wabanong onje oshki pimadaziwin. Shawanong onje oshki niwjig. Ishpinchimo jonje abita endaso pibodezejig. Kiwednon onje Kichayak. Migwech apitenda guad pimadazewin. Sometimes we forget to thank the Creator for what we have, the air that we breathe, the sun that was shining this morning, and the rain that's coming soon. But we still need that rain. And this gathering today and the last few days, the information that was shared, and people that wanted to take back the information that they seen in the workshops. And it was nice to hear that there is going to be a lot of ongoing discussions about what's good in the healthcare system. I am very nervous about AI because I'm still learning my iPhone right now, so I got a lot catching up to do. But anyways, everybody have a safe trip home until we see you again. Miigwech.